Hey everybody, welcome to Ask Anything episode, I think 6, and we're here for a live podcast with the live studio audience. Everyone cheer. Yeah! All right, and so we have some audience questions that we're going to go ahead and take. So do we have a first question? Oh, okay, you lost your chance. Go ahead.
Biggest amount of Oreos that you've ever eaten.
What is the biggest amount of Oreos that you have ever eaten? Caleb, why don't you go ahead and take that first?
I don't actually know. I don't count. Maybe like half a sleeve. Maybe a full sleeve at once.
One time I ate a whole thing by myself, which I also saw Seth Ryan do this weekend as well, and he's the smallest guy in here. So
yeah, Seth did down the Oreos.
Seth is just crushing the Oreos. I have a funny story about that. There's a girl I know who, before she married her husband, she was at her then boyfriend's house, now husband, and she licked all the frosting out and was like watching TV or something and mindlessly just put the cookies back into the sleeve and then ate all the cream and then put the Oreos back into the pantry when she was done. And so then the next day, that guy's mom opened up the pantry and found just a bunch of creamless Oreos in the pantry. So there you go. That's a funny story about Oreos. All right. Do we have another question? Lying to protect somebody. So the question was, if you didn't hear her, in TV shows you'll hear things like, I was lying to protect you. So let me give an example. It might be your mom gets a new haircut and she comes home and she says, what do you think about my haircut? And you don't really like it, but you say, it looks good, but you don't really think that. Is that like an example of what you mean? Okay. Caleb?
Well, this is actually something Christians have dealt with for a long time. I can think back to the Holocaust. You guys know what the Holocaust is, right? When Germany kind of started exterminating Jews all across Europe. And there was a lot of debate back then, too, about whether it was okay to hide, like, Jewish people in your house somewhere and then tell, like, the Gestapo, which was the German police, when they came and asked you, tell them a lie and say, no, I'm not hiding any here, right? And so I think what you are dealing with when you are talking about that is you're talking about whether it's more ethical to lie to protect someone from being murdered, or more ethical not to lie and to tell the truth and let that person, right, be driven off and be killed. Which one do you guys think it would be? Does somebody have an answer?
I think the lying one. You don't want to kill someone.
Okay, so Estelle says that lying would be better than letting someone be killed. Yeah, Kenley.
You're sinning either way, really, because if you're lying to protect them, but if not, you're basically letting them get killed, which is almost like murdering them, which is also a sin. So you're really sinning either way, but I think the lying is the most reasonable one.
Okay, so Kenley says that lying to protect them might be a sin, but the worst sin would be like participating in their murder, so to speak, by telling the truth. Right? So that's the question that we have to then figure out is it a sin on the front end to lie if you're protecting someone? And I'm going to throw it to Nick.
Thanks. Thanks. So in this is a way more hard case than in general,
Fair.
Because you're dealing with life and death. And so that I don't even want to come down and give a definitive yes or no, because it could go both ways, right? But when it comes to lying or telling half truths to your parents and stuff, that's definitely a lie and that's definitely a sin. So probably most of the time, the instance you're thinking about or that you asked about is you're not saving a Jewish person's life is probably my guess. And so practically speaking, in your life, when your parents ask you something and you say something, but you keep, you have 100% of something to tell them, but you keep 50% of it to yourself and you tell them the other 50%, you didn't lie per se, but you didn't tell them the whole truth. You know what I'm talking about? I also think that is deceitful and dishonest because you know the whole truth you're assuming it will get you in trouble or it will make them mad or whatever, and so therefore you're trying to manipulate or engineer what happens, the outcome, in your favor, as opposed to trusting that God is totally in control despite those things. So I hate lying and I hate liars, and so I would always lean towards I would be I would have uncommon integrity. And so I would be as truthful as you can be, even if it's painful and even if there's consequences that come along with it, because it's freeing when you're 100% truthful, and carrying lies is very, very, you're going to feel it over time.
Can I add one more thing to that? So I think the difference that you're hearing there was lying to protect yourself versus lying to protect someone else, right? So when you're lying to protect yourself, it's always in your own self-interest. Like Nick was saying, it's always to manipulate the amount of information that someone else has to make a decision, right? And so when you're doing that, like you are doing it in the interest of protecting yourself, and what you're in turn doing is you're giving that person less information to work off of, and in that sense, you're kind of making their world a lie, in a sense. Does that make sense? Like, because they don't have the whole truth of a situation, they're working off of a half-truth as well. And it becomes not just you, it becomes deceitful to them as well, like Nick was saying. So.
Yeah. Okay. Here, there. I mean, that's just... So she said, if you do something your mom tells you not to do, for example, don't eat the last cookie, and then you do, that's straight up disobeying.
Yeah.
That's not lying. I mean, unless she comes to you and says, Kenley, did you eat the last cookie? And you say no, then you disobeyed and you compounded it with a lie. So, yeah.
Yes.
Well, you're just, again, like Caleb said, you're preserving yourself. Like, you're in it for self-interest, because you're afraid you're going to get punished, you're going to get grounded, you're going to get your phone taken away, whatever, right? And so you're just saying whatever you feel like you should say to win it. Did that answer your question? Okay. Do you have anything to add?
No.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward, pretty cut and dry. You disobeyed and then you lied.
I have 2 questions.
Oh my goodness. Okay. First one.
Why do I burp when I drink soda?
Why do you burp when you drink soda? Well, do you know?
Yeah.
You do?
It has gas in it.
It has gas in it, dude. It's acidic.
Little bubbles go whoop.
And little bubbles go whoop.
And they come back out.
They come back out.
Up or down.
And my second question
Up
is,
or down.
It's a burp. It's a elevator.
Thanks for taking it one step further.
is, why does my stomach feel sick when I eat too much Oreos?
I have a question. Does your stomach feel sick right now? You've eaten all the Oreos. If you guys wanted Oreos,
He ain't done yet.
Seth walks in the room, goes to the snack table, gets a snack, and brings it to his seat every
And
single
it's
time.
often Oreos.
Well, last night he had a whole pizza. So,
And Oreos.
oh,
It was Taylor.
and he's not here.
He's not here to defend
He's
himself.
not here to defend
Poor
himself.
guy.
The whole night I saw Taylor.
So, it's because all that food is a bunch of fake stuff, and like, God didn't design the world with Oreos in it. Yep. So, like, that's why when you eat broccoli and pears and those things, feels better. That's why. Do you have anything to add to that?
No,
Okay.
I have nothing to add.
Chloe, you had another one? Okay, Chloe. That's a good question. So you're saying, like, certain words, certain language, like cussing and those things, you were told growing up for a long time that it was wrong. Yet you saw it in the quiet time afterwards when it said, be damned to hell. Yeah? And you were like, is that bad? And then are you asking, like, am I over exaggerating? Like, am I freaking out too much about bad words? Okay. No, those are good questions. So specifically, we can address the Lord's name in vain, and then that specific phrase. So, do you have anything?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll let Caleb talk first. I'll go second.
So yeah, more specifically to that exact question, like that word is spiritual language first. So damnation was like the root, and that's been used for a long time in Christian culture to talk about someone who is what we've been talking about in the past couple of days, someone who is that kind of a bush, a shrub, right? Someone who continues to trust in themselves, continues to put strength in themselves. And if that person lives their life to that end and dies, then they've brought that damnation upon themselves, right? So when we say that word, we're not using it to swear. We're using it to talk about a state in which they've put themselves, okay? And so that word was actually co-opted by culture from us to be used for something else. So if you see it used in Christian circles, it's not meant to be a swear word. It's meant to talk about a state that a person's in. More broadly, swearing in general, right, is a bigger issue, and I might let Nick speak to that a little bit.
I'm trying to put my friendship bracelet on. So swearing, yeah. So good clarification on that. So I don't think that that's like, hey, this devotional is gotten very liberal, and they're not as concerned about swearing and stuff like that. It's like what he said. It is spiritual language, and it speaks about a condition, an eternal condition, about being basically sentenced to hell, right? So, and in that instance, hell is also not a swear word because hell is a literal place. It's found in the Bible, all the things, right? The one I want to talk about, oh my God, like saying the Lord's name in vain, for example. Obviously, if you say that phrase like while you're singing a worship song, like it's one thing. But what people do is they've reduced it down to like a curse word or just saying something like as an expletive, like you bang your thumb on a hammer or something like that. Yeah?
Sacrilegious?
Yeah, I mean, it's sacrilegious. It's like, so in the 10 Commandments, like there's one specific commandment that says you should not take the Lord's name in vain. He doesn't say like you shouldn't use these other words either. Like, so he specifically is saying don't use my name as a like without putting it in its proper place. And so I actually personally I like that phrase a whole lot less than I like many other swear words, many other common swear words. And I'm not condoning those other words necessarily by any means, but that one rubs me the most the wrong way. And I think that one is the most culturally accepted by and large. And I think even as Christians, sometimes I hear people fall into it. And I just think we need to have reverence for God in his proper place. And I think that's why that's really important to me. So did that answer your question? Cool. All right. Seth has one. And Alex, do you have one? Okay, so after Seth, we have Alex.
If someone says a substitute for a swear word, are they basically saying the swear word?
Well, let's hold on. Good question.
Yeah.
So he said, if someone says a substitute for a swear word, are they basically saying the swear word? He's answering it. He says yes. What does our diagram that we've been going through this weekend, so for those of you who are watching or listening, you may be a little bit out of the loop. What's our diagram say? What do you think the answer in the diagram would be? Like on the thorny bush side, you said some other word, but at the heart, what's really going on? You guys understand what I'm saying? So effectively, yes, but you know, again, I can't judge your motive. And so, like, if you want to go around, like, to all the kids in your life group, and anytime they say, darn it, like, you know, if you want to, like, get on them for that, like, okay, but then you're going to slide into a place of legalism and pride, and that's something that you have to probably deal with as well. So that's why all that stuff is such a slippery slope. like we can't judge each other's motives. We can only see the fruit of it, and God judges and knows the heart. So Alex, then Kenley, and then up here.
Did you know that Oreos are vegan?
Let's have some vegan potatoes.
No comment.
Next question.
Like, do you know what I'm saying?
Can you repeat it?
Yeah. So the question is, I think generally, like where do swear words come from? Like, how do we get that concept? And is it really wrong to say it if it's just a word that someone else made up? Like, it certainly could be wrong for other reasons, but is swearing itself a cultural construct? Is that kind of what you're trying to ask, Henley? Yeah. So there's a couple things here. Number one, I'd say that the vast majority of us understand and know what a swear word is and isn't. I'd say there's probably not a lot of variation in here between what your parents teach you is acceptable to say and what they teach you isn't. I think the bigger question and the thing that we've been trying to get at here this weekend, once again, looking at our diagram, is what the attitude behind it is. And Paul, in multiple places in the New Testament, in his letters to churches who are dealing with similar questions, is you're asking the wrong question. You're asking what you can't say, when really you should be asking, what should I be saying? Right? And so you want to know negatively what you're not supposed to do. And Paul is asking instead, what should you be doing? What godly thing should you be doing? And he says all over the place, the answer to that question is to have your language seasoned with salt. It's to be kind and gracious and gentle towards each other. And I'd say that actually kind of undoes not just swear words, but normal words that you say to people in anger or like frustration or annoyance. You know, so you could be saying,
or like joking,
right,
like with your friend, like calling them names and stuff.
Yeah, like it undoes stuff even that you might say normally, but in a bad heart or in a bad context, words that aren't even you would consider swear words that Paul would say, like we shouldn't be saying any of that because we're supposed to be kind to each other, we're supposed to be gracious to each other, and so I really think it's about asking the right question, and not like. I mean, it's good to have a helpful list of things, you know, that are considered wrong. But I think the even bigger question is, like, how do we talk to each other in a way that's honoring? How do we talk to each other in a way that's loving? And so that's what I would say.
Yeah, there's a verse in Ephesians, and Paul says, don't let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouth. And so a lot of times we stop there, like, what is unwholesome? And so this word is unwholesome, that word is unwholesome. But he goes on to say, but only what is helpful for building others up. So if you stop short of that phrase in that verse, do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouth, what you're basically saying is don't cuss. But what if you extended it and said, but only, to Caleb's point, but only what's helpful for building others up? So what if the only thing you said to other people were things that were helpful to building them up? My guess is there's a 5% in your language that's unwholesome, and there's 5% that's helpful for building others up, and then there's another 90% where you're just saying stuff, and it's neither helpful nor not helpful. And so what if you increase the intentionality of that 5% of what's helpful to 10% or 15% or 20%? All of a sudden, you would become everyone's favorite person in school. Not that that's your goal, but because you're encouraging them, you're building them up, you're telling them about, you're like, hey, telling them how great of a job they're doing on group projects and stuff like that. That is universally attractive. So it's not just like, I want to hang out with Kenley because she doesn't cuss. It's like, I want to hang out with Kenley because Kenley makes me feel great. Like, she always encourages me. She's always super nice. Everything she says is helpful for building others up. Imagine if all of us in this room, there's 20 some of us, 30 some of us, did that. Like, we could go out and be difference makers just with our words alone. And like when we talk about the fruit of the Spirit, those are things that are going to come out of that, like that natural overflow of your heart, because you're connected to Jesus and because you're being intentional about building others up. And everyone wants to be friends with a person like that. And then you know what that does? That gives you a platform to tell them about Jesus. And so now you're not just trying to manage sin, but you're actually like giving people a tangible example of what it's like to follow Jesus. Does that make sense? Do you see how that's different? Like on one hand, it's a bunch of lists of do's and don'ts. On the other hand, it's look at all the things you could do and how much better that could be. Like that gets me excited. And you don't really have to try and change much. You just have to like be really intentional about the things you say, who you say it to, and how you say it. Does that make sense? All right. We have time for one or two more maybe. So right here. That's right. If you're an actor and the script like has a swear word in it, are you bad for saying it? I mean, you're not like, okay, first and foremost, as we've been talking about, every single one of us is in the same condition. We're all bad. We're only good because of Jesus. That's the only thing that changes us, right? So first and foremost, like to judge a person off of one bad moment or to think a person's amazing based off one great moment, none of those work, right? And so like if you are put in that position, I don't know. I mean, that's something that you have to wrestle with God, I think, and your parents and like those types of things. I mean, if you're an actress in a play, and you have to say a certain word, like, and if not, you're gonna get fired. I don't know. Just depends what you want to stand for. And like, I think as a Christian, it could speak volumes if you say like, I'm not gonna do that. And what the fear is you may lose your job, you may lose like your part, and that's where again we go back to asking these questions like, what do we really want? Like, do we want the fame, the attention, or do we want to honor God in every way in our lives? And so, I'm not saying it's right or it's wrong, one way or the other. I do think there are certain things that you would probably want to draw a line. Like, I'm not going to cross this line because it's definitely sinful. So I don't know. Like it depends. I think it depends on a lot of things. Depends on if you're this age, your parents. Depends on how you're like, what are they called? Theater coach, whatever that person called, director. What their opinion is, where they stand. But I would lean toward trying to refrain from that if you can, and ask them like, can I use a substitute or something like that? And listen, you're in middle school, and more than likely, you're probably not gonna have to cross that bridge. But I will tell you, most assuredly, you're gonna walk in one day into high school and college, and more opportunities where the lines are blurry are going to be presented to you. So don't just wander aimlessly without a plan, but figure out what you're going to stand for and how you're going to do it, and be willing. Like, listen, when Jesus says, take up your cross and follow me daily, he's not saying it's going to be easy to follow him. So maybe in like choosing not to say a certain line, you lose a part. Is it worth it for following Jesus? I mean, you have to answer for yourself, but I think it is. And so it's just coming to the realization that Jesus matters on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of your life, not just Sunday. I think we have to shift our minds a little bit. I think it's easy to just fall into I'll follow Jesus on Sunday as opposed to the rest of the time. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question? Okay. Any more? We have time for one more.
Why is 9 plus 10 not 21?
Why is 9 plus 10 not 21? Because it's 19.
Why is it?
Because, I mean, if I have 9 friendship bracelets and another 10, and if I add them together and count, it's going to equal 19. We can do that after the podcast ends. Any more serious questions? Anybody got? Do you have one, Brandon? Is it a serious one, Seth? Yeah. Okay. Oh, wait, Chloe has one too. Go ahead. Is it serious? Okay. All right. Yeah.
Or am I just, again, over-exaggerating?
So is there a line between being modest and not? Morgan, do you want to answer this one?
Sure.
Okay. Morgan, just jump on in and start talking into this microphone.
Did we repeat the question already?
Yes.
Okay, so I think this is just a really common question for women in general because we do look around and it's easy to see a lot of different ideas of modesty. But one, I would say, as a middle schooler, again, you do follow the rules of your parents. So while you're in their house, you follow their rules. When I was growing up, I wasn't allowed to wear sweatpants outside of the house because my parents thought that it looked grungy. So I didn't wear sweatpants outside of the house. But when you move out of your parents' house, like Nick was saying, lines are very blurred when you move out. And so you do need to come up with something for yourself. And I think a good question to ask yourself is, why am I wearing what I'm wearing? The whole talk that we've been having this whole weekend is, why do you do what you do? So I think it's also a good question for, why do I wear what I wear? What kind of attention am I wanting to gather? And am I thinking about how what I wear is going to affect the people around me? So specifically, women, how is what I wear going to attract men? Am I going to get them to look at my body, or am I going to get them to look at my soul and my personality, and am I going to show them the love of God? And so sometimes leggings aren't going to be a frustration or a hindrance to any men, but I think erring on the side of caution of saying, you know what, this might be showing a little bit too much, or it might be a little bit revealing, is wise. And if we're asking ourselves that, then we're probably going to err on the side of modesty more. I know that. So like, I'm a woman and I'm married, and I sometimes, when I walk out of the house, I'll ask Caleb, is this a modest outfit? And he'll tell me honestly, like, I would wear it around the house, but maybe not out in public. And so really just asking yourself consistently. Obviously, there's nothing in Scripture about leggings because they didn't have them. But but just what is my goal and what is my purpose with what I'm wearing? And do I want to attract people to my heart or my body? And I think as Christian women, we know that attracting someone to our body is really empty. And it's not our goal, and we don't want someone that just wants us for our outward appearance, because the Lord looks at the heart, and we want the people around us to also be thinking about our heart, and we want to be serving them with our bodies and with our choices and with our words. So, sorry. Do you have anything to add?
All right. Hey, we're gonna wrap this up. So yes, Seth, we're done. Thanks, guys. See you next time.